Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece for Reason to Resist on August 24th, 2025. The genocidal Zionist influencer Dahlia Kurtz has filed a defamation lawsuit against Roger Waters and Yves Engler. Roger, of course, is the co-founder of the rock band Pink Floyd and a world-renowned human rights activist. He's also a friend of mine whom I've had the privilege to interview on Reason to Resist several times. Yves Engler is an author, activist, and outspoken critic of Canadian foreign policy. In Canada, Yves is well known for his passionate defense of Palestinian human rights. He is also currently running to be the leader of Canada's new Democratic Party. Yves, too, is a friend of mine and has been a frequent guest on Reason to Resist. Now, before I delve into this scandalous lawsuit, I want to clarify one thing. Although I'm friends with Roger and Yves, I do not represent them in this lawsuit. Moreover, Yves and Roger have not asked me directly or indirectly to issue a report on this lawsuit, nor have they directed or authorized me to comment in any particular way on Kurtz's litigation. In this report, I'm speaking strictly on my own behalf and at my own initiative. As I'll explain, Kurtz's lawsuit, which was filed 1 month ago in the Superior Court of the Canadian province of Quebec, is yet another example of Zionists' increasingly aggressive use of litigation to silence and punish critics of Israel's genocidal regime. Now, you might be wondering, who is Dahlia Kurtz? Well, this is how her lawyers describe her in the petition that they filed a few weeks ago in the Quebec Superior Court, and I'm quoting, Dahlia Kurtz is a social media influencer who has had a constant presence in Canadian media since 2011. She began her career as a news reporter and producer with CBC, that's Canada's national broadcaster, in or around 2003, and went on to become a nationally syndicated writer. In 2013, she became a radio talk show host at CJOB in Winnipeg. Thereafter, she was involved in various radio shows through Canada, namely CJAD in Montreal, CFRA in Ottawa, and eventually became the national morning radio show host for Sirius XM. Kurtz is also known for her podcast, which has reached over 40 million people as of the date of the present proceedings, and for her occasional contributions to newspapers, such as the National Post. Kurtz has an important social media presence, which forms an integral part of her brand, and is mainly active on X. Her publications on X typically reach about 1 million people per day, and have reached up to 34 million people per day. So it will be readily apparent from Kurtz's own description of herself that she is a very public figure. She tries very hard to use her brand to influence people. And she comments on matters which apparently attract the attention of a substantial following in Canada and perhaps internationally as well. And all of these factors will become relevant, or it should be apparent why they're relevant to this lawsuit as I proceed to discuss the litigation. But in the interim, I'd like to talk briefly about Kurtz's lawyer. Kurtz is represented by a notorious Zionist advocate by the name of Neil Oberman. Earlier in this year's Canadian federal election, Oberman ran for the Conservative Party in the Montreal riding of Montreal. Now, this is the same riding that was held years ago by Irwin Cotler, a former Canadian Justice Minister who's arguably Canada's most prominent Zionist. Since Cotler retired from politics in 2015, the riding of Montreal has been held by fanatical Zionist Anthony Housefather. As you can see from this April 2025 article in Canadian Jewish News, both Oberman and Housefather published photos of themselves with Cotler when they ran in this past election. According to Canadian Jewish News, Cotler only endorsed Housefather, who comes from the same party as Cotler, the Liberal Party of Canada, while Cotler's wife, Ariella, ordered a lawn sign from Oberman. Ariella Cotler is an Israeli who was born and raised in Jerusalem. She studied at Hebrew University and subsequently worked as a legislative assistant and parliamentary secretary for the arch-terrorist Menachem Begin. In this article, the Canadian Jewish News described Oberman as, quote, a lawyer who's gained prominence helping Jewish students and Montreal institutions impacted by surging anti-Israel activism since the terrorist attacks on Israel on October 7th, 2023. Ultimately, Oberman lost the election to Housefather, and by a significant margin, 51% for Housefather to 40% for Oberman. Oberman's electoral loss allowed him to return to the nasty, sordid business of using the legal system to silence critics of his beloved genocidal entity. Oberman's commitment to the genocidal entity is so extreme that he considers Housefather and the Liberal Party to be anti-Israel. This same Canadian Jewish News article stated as follows: on Israel and anti-Semitism, Oberman is betting that Jews of Côte Saint-Luc and Hampstead are, quote, overwhelmingly rejecting the Liberal Party, close quote. He says Carney's comments and omissions on Gaza, without even mentioning one hostage, speak to the party's orientation. Every day, the Liberal Party does something to basically disrespect the Jewish population in this riding and throughout Canada, and there is nothing my opponent can do about it. There's no message he can pitch. Well, apparently the voters disagreed with you, Mr. Oberman. And by the way, the idea that the Liberals don't mention the hostages, I mean, okay, they don't often actually identify them by name, but they constantly refer to the hostages. Of all of the many statements they've put out about Israel and Palestine during this genocidal rampage in occupied Palestine, I can't think of a single one that didn't demand the release of these so-called hostages. And they are referred to as hostages, even though the 20 or so who remain in the custody of Palestinian militants are reportedly Israeli soldiers, and therefore they're prisoners of war, not hostages. By contrast, the Liberal Party never mentions the real hostages, the thousands of Palestinian civilians who are languishing in Israeli dungeons, many of them being subjected to various sadistic forms of torture. Now, under both Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, the Liberal government has continued to authorize weapons exports to Israel in flagrant violation of international Canadian law and basic human decency. Despite the audacity and monstrousness of Israel's crimes, the Liberal government continues to confer trade benefits upon Israel under the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement. The Liberal government continues to do nothing about Canadian citizens who serve in Israel's genocidal military. At the United Nations, the government of Justin Trudeau voted in Israel's favor more than any prior Canadian government, even the government of Trudeau's conservative predecessor, Stephen Harper, a Christian evangelical who believes that Israel can do no wrong. And based on what we've seen thus far from Mark Carney since he became Prime Minister of Canada and replaced Trudeau earlier this year, I think we can anticipate that he's going to vote in Israel's favor at the United Nations at least as often as Trudeau did. Now, as a result of these and other factors, no sane observer would characterize the Liberal Party as anything but Zionist and pro-Israel. And within the Liberal caucus, Anthony Housefather is almost certainly the most fanatical supporter of the genocidal entity. Let me tell you just how fanatical this character is. Housefather is the president of the Canada-Israel Parliamentary Group. In May 2018, an Israeli sniper shot Canadian-Palestinian Dr. Tarek Loubani. At the time, Dr. Loubani was wearing medical garb and was in an open area in broad daylight for the purpose of treating Palestinian civilians who were being gunned down mercilessly by Israeli snipers in the Great March of Return. In response to this crime, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned in a completely toothless manner the shooting of Tarek Loubani, but did nothing at all to hold Israel accountable, as was entirely predictable. And although Trudeau did nothing to hold Israel accountable, Housefather wasn't happy with the response to this crime of the leader of his own party. So what did he do? He put out a statement in which he distanced himself from the Prime Minister's hot air condemnation of Israel and blamed Hamas for the shooting of Dr. Loubani, even though there was not a shred of evidence that Hamas was in any way involved in the shooting of Dr. Loubani. Imagine how pro-Israel an individual would have to be to believe that the Liberals and Housefather are not sufficiently committed to Israel. For these and other reasons, I would imagine that Oberman is perfectly comfortable with the fascist politics of Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the most extreme ministers in the Netanyahu regime. Whether that's the case or not, I'll leave you to decide as I talk some more about Oberman later in this report. Now, returning to Kurtz's lawsuit, it's very important to understand the background of this case. In February of this year, Montreal police arrested Yves Engler and charged him with criminal harassment. Why? Because on numerous occasions, Yves had condemned Dahlia Kurtz on X. That's it, folks. He had condemned her on X on numerous occasions. Yves had to spend 5 nights in jail because he refused to sign an undertaking that he would not comment publicly on the charges against him. After 5 days in a dungeon, the police were obliged to release Yves because a Quebec judge indicated in court that the police had no right to prevent Yves from commenting publicly on the charges against him. That's a proposition you'd think the police would understand in a so-called democracy, which enshrines free speech as a constitutional right. Now, Yves, and as I explained in an interview on Reason to Resist with Yves just after he emerged from prison, he's never met Dahlia Kurtz. He did not even follow her on X. And he's never attempted to email her. He's never telephoned her. He's never gone to her home or place of business. All he did was comment on her unhinged commentary on X, and that commentary apparently was being driven into his feed, not because he wanted it there, but because that's where the algorithm wanted it to go. And for this, Yves was charged with criminal harassment. In mid-July, days before Oberman filed Kurtz's defamation lawsuit against Yves and Roger, the police dropped the charges against Yves relating to his online criticisms of Kurtz. Also, by that time, Yves had announced that he was going to run to be the leader of the New Democratic Party. This sequence of events raises troubling questions. First, did Kurtz file her defamation lawsuit because the criminal proceeding against Yves had collapsed? Second, did she file her lawsuit to obstruct Yves' campaign for the leadership of the NDP? And by the way, these two questions are not mutually exclusive. It's possible that she filed her defamation lawsuit for both of these reasons. And of course, another non-mutually exclusive potential reason for her filing this lawsuit is that she thinks that despite the total lack of merit of this claim, that the filing of it will intimidate Yves and or Roger and cause them to retract some or all of their statements in fear of having to defend this lawsuit and expend the money necessary to do so. My strong suspicion is that Kurtz has done this, has filed this lawsuit for all of those reasons. So where does Roger Waters fit into all of this? On February 22nd of this year, in an act of solidarity with Yves, Roger published a video on Instagram, Facebook, X, and YouTube in which he, in his characteristic colorful language, described Kurtz as a, quote, sick puppet in support of genocide, close quote. And he also said that Kurtz, quote, should be locked up in a loony bin, close quote.
Voilà, c'est moi, Roger. This is a very short video for Yves Engler. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, brother. Just in support. I know you're in prison in Montreal, and there's a hearing on Monday. I wish I could be there. I can't be. Dahlia Kurtz, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, should obviously be locked up in a loony bin with all the other sick little puppies who support the genocide of the Palestinian people. Let's hope this awful nightmare of crucifying people who stand up for human rights goes away soon. But until it does, we must stand shoulder to shoulder. Karen Rodman, thank you so much for sending me this stuff about Yves. Yves, I'm with you all the way, brother. I should be watching on Monday to see what happens. If there's anything else I can do, I will do it. All right, cheers, brother.
Of course, those are strong words, but perhaps you should wait until I take you to some of Kurtz's public commentary before you decide for yourself whether Roger's words were justified. And just before I take you to that commentary, I want to say a few words about the law of defamation in Quebec. What I'm about to say is not intended to be a thorough primer on defamation law. I simply want to give you a general sense of what the applicable law will be in this case. In Quebec, even when you speak harshly about an individual in the public domain, you can avoid legal liability in several ways. One way you can avoid legal liability for your harsh commentary is by proving that your statements are true. In Quebec, however, truth is not a complete defense. Even truthful statements can be considered defamatory if they were disclosed without a legitimate public interest. For example, publishing private or embarrassing but true information, such as medical or intimate details, may still be actionable if done without justification and causes reputational harm. In this case, Yves did not disclose any private information about Kurtz. His expressions of opinion were based entirely on Kurtz's public commentary on X. Moreover, Kurtz has a wide following and posts extensively on Israel's treatment of Palestinians. As you'll see in a moment, she also uses her platform to denigrate and demonize Muslims. Therefore, in my opinion, Yves and Roger have a very strong argument that the subject matter of their comments is of considerable public importance. Now, another possible defense available to them is that of fair comment. Even if the statements were not true, the defense may be available provided that the statements were made in good faith and on matters of public concern. Personally, I have no doubt that Roger and Yves genuinely believe what they said about Kurtz and that they are therefore acted in good faith. And I would be very surprised if a court of law came to any other conclusion. And as I just explained, they also have a very strong argument that the subject matter of their comments is a matter of public concern. So the defense of fair comment is very likely to be available to them. And with that, I'd like to take a closer look at Kurtz's public commentary to help to ascertain whether or not Roger and Yves made fair commentary about Dahlia Kurtz. But first, let's take a closer look at what Yves is alleged to have said about Kurtz. This is an excerpt from the petition filed by Oberman on Kurtz's behalf in the Quebec Superior Court, and I'm going to focus here on paragraph 13 in particular. On March 10th, 2024, Engler began systematically replying to plaintiff's publication and posting his own publications on, among other things, X, Instagram, and Facebook, calling her a, quote, sick genocidal maniac, close quote, a, quote, fascist thug, close quote, a, quote, Jewish supremacist, and a racist genocide promoter, close quote, and as stated here in paragraph 15, or 13, I should say, many more vicious insults, the whole of which appears more fully from Engler's social media publications attached here too. So the key questions in this lawsuit will be, were these statements by Yves true? And secondly, whether or not they were true, did the statements constitute fair comment? So with that, let's turn to Kurtz's public commentary to try to evaluate the veracity and fairness of Yves Engler's and Roger Waters' criticisms of Dahlia Kurtz. And as you consider what I'm about to show you, bear in mind that I did not do an exhaustive examination of Kurtz's public commentary, not even close, as a matter of fact. Kurtz is a formidable user of social media. She joined X in 2009, and on that platform alone, she has almost 52,000 posts. I looked at only a few hundred of her recent posts, and I looked only at X. I did not examine any other social media platform that Kurtz employs. And if that small sample size yielded what I'm about to show you, you can just imagine how horrific her commentary is in its totality. So let's begin with this one. This is a recent post that Dahlia Kurtz issued on X, which purports to show a photograph or a video of a person whom she describes as a fat Gaza man eating Dubai chocolate knafe dessert. And she goes on and says, and it looks delicious. Weird Al Yankovic also has something to say about this, so volume up. And please send help. He needs a diet and an exercise plan. Stat. Close quote. Now, what can one say about this vile post? First of all, how do we know that this person is actually a Palestinian in Gaza? How do we know that this was shot during the past few months when Israel's starvation plan was revved up into full effect in the Gaza Strip? You shouldn't assume that this man is a Palestinian in Gaza or that this was shot during the relevant period of time. But let's suppose that it was, this is actually a Palestinian man who is in Gaza at the current time, and that he's eating a delicious chocolate knafe dessert. Gaza has a population, depending upon how many civilians the maniacs in Israel have murdered, in the range of 2.1 million people. Now, you can still have a famine affecting hundreds of thousands of people in the Gaza Strip, while at the same time, a small number of them are not suffering from acute malnutrition, and a few of them may, in fact, be overweight. That doesn't prove that there isn't a famine happening, and this should be evident to anybody who has a functioning brain and an ounce of human decency. At the time that Kurtz published this post, the internet had exploded with videos and photos of starving Palestinians. Also, numerous Western-based doctors working in Gaza have confirmed that dozens of civilians, including children, have starved to death within the past few weeks, and that hundreds of thousands are now suffering from acute malnutrition. As of yesterday, Gaza hospitals had recorded 281 deaths due to malnutrition, including 114 children. So obvious is the presence of mass starvation in the Gaza Strip that even Donald Trump, the most pro-Israel president in the history of the United States, has repeatedly acknowledged that civilians are starving in Gaza. 2 days ago, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, issued a report stating that famine has been confirmed in the Gaza governorate. The IPC stated as follows, quote, "As this famine is entirely man-made, it can be halted and reversed. The time for debate and hesitation has passed. Starvation is present and is rapidly spreading. There should be no doubt in anyone's mind that an immediate at-scale response is needed," close quote. According to the IPC, 500,000 people in Gaza are experiencing catastrophic hunger. Now, here's what Tom Fletcher, the UN's humanitarian chief, had to say about the IPC's report.
It is a famine. The Gaza famine. It is a famine that we could have prevented if we had been allowed. Yet food stacks up at borders because of systematic obstruction by Israel. It is a famine within a few hundred meters of food in a fertile land. It is a famine that hits the most vulnerable first, each with a name, each with a story, that strips people of dignity before it strips them of life, that forces a parent to choose which child to feed, that forces people to risk their lives to seek food.
I'm going to repeat what the IPC said. There should be no doubt in anyone's mind about the man-made famine in Gaza, and yet this genocidal, racist piece of trash, Dahlia Kurtz, is trying to foment doubt about what the world can see in broad daylight. Here's another example of her genocidal commentary. This recent post on X states as follows. So on a day when Hamas is parading dead babies in front of cheering Gazans, of course, that is a flagrant lie. There has never been a parading of dead babies in front of cheering Gazans anywhere in the Gaza Strip. This is atrocity lies designed to foment public support for the ongoing genocide. She continues, Kurtz, on that day, the UN makes a statement about desalination systems in Gaza because Gazans are thirsty. But desalination won't solve that problem. Yes, they are thirsty, but they are thirsty for blood. Not only is she mocking the idea that they are being deprived of water by the genocidal Israeli entity, something which has been proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, but she's actually characterizing all the people of Gaza as being bloodthirsty. She doesn't confine this to militants who are armed. She says they are thirsty, they being the people of Gaza, which presumably would include the children. She's characterizing them all like the most extreme, foul, vile members of the Israeli political elite as being terrorists. Here's another post in which Kurtz again derides the claim that Palestinians in Gaza are thirsty. This was a few days ago. She says, "I'm amazed at how starving Gazans have the ability to film telenovelas in war. Fav moments. A camera catching him waking up, emotional fist banging when water didn't work, walking with heavy water jugs and no shoes, an arm asking for help, wiping non-existent sweat from his brow." That's right. This genocidal, sick maniac is essentially telling the world there that all of this evidence about starvation and thirst in the Gaza Strip is just theater. It's just acting by Palestinians trying to pull on the heartstrings of people in the West. Now, not only does Kurtz deny that Palestinians are starving and that they're being deprived of water, and not only does she mock the notion that that's true, but she also mocks the demolition of Gaza and the God whom Muslims in the occupied Gaza Strip worship. Have a look at this. This was within the past week, this odious post, and it begins 2023. Gaza is great. October 7th, 2023. Allahu Akbar. 2025. Gaza is in ruins. So what happened? Doesn't look like Allahu turned out to be so Akbar. Wow. Now, nowhere in that post does she deny that Gaza is in ruins. She, in fact, is openly acknowledging that Gaza is in ruins. And not only does that not trouble her, she actually delights in it, because in her twisted mind, this proves that the God of the Muslim people is not nearly as powerful as they claim him to be. And this is a constant theme, this denigration of Muslims, which I'm going to return to in a moment. And finally, of course, there is the inevitable and obligatory declaration of love by Dahlia Kurtz for Israel's genocidal military. She says here, again, very recent post on X, "I stand by the IDF and any Canadian who has ever served in the IDF. The IDF doesn't just protect Israel, it protects the world." That's right, it protects Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran. It's protecting all of them. And it's protecting the people of Gaza and the people of the occupied West Bank too. And hell, if it wasn't for the murderous IDF, we over here on the other side of the ocean would be in serious trouble, because after all, who would be able to protect us as well as the world's most moral army? Let me just remind you about some of the crimes committed by the Great Protector. And these have not only been documented in video and photography, the commission of these crimes has also been attested to by doctors from the West who have gone and have worked in Gaza during the genocidal rampage of the Israeli entity. There is ample evidence that the Israeli military has shot Palestinian children in the head. There is ample evidence that the Israeli military has shot pregnant women. There's ample evidence that it has killed babies in incubators. There's ample evidence that it has burned Palestinian children alive. There's ample evidence that it has effectively forced Palestinian children to undergo amputations without anesthetic. There is ample evidence that it rapes Palestinian detainees. There is ample evidence that it has completely, willfully destroyed Gaza's medical system. thereby depriving Palestinians who have been wounded of the necessary life-saving treatments, but also depriving Palestinians of the care they need in respect of preventable disease. There's ample evidence that this protector, the Israeli military, has completely demolished the educational system of Gaza. There's ample evidence that is almost completely demolished the mosques in Gaza. I could go on and on, people. This is what this lunatic describes as the world's protector, not just Israel's protector, but the world's protector. Now, as I've indicated, it isn't just the Palestinians who are routinely targeted by Dahlia Kurtz with her hateful, malicious, and mendacious invective. It's also Muslims as a whole. Kurtz despises Muslims, and she makes no bones about that. Even worse, she encourages others to despise Muslims. Have a look at this. So this was a photograph taken at a recent protest in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, by supporters of the Palestinian cause. And in this particular moment at the protest, Muslim men gathered in the street in order to pray. And this is what Kurtz had to say about this. Does this look like praying or praying to you? Preying, which is the verb from which the word predator is derived. Police helped by shutting down the street between Canada's Parliament and the Prime Minister's office for this. Say hello to your new masters. So basically what Kurtz is saying here is that Muslim men are predators, that they're dangerous, and not only that, but that they've taken over the country. That's what this raging Islamophobe wants you to believe. But there's plenty more like this, and I'm only going to show you a very limited sample of her hateful commentary about Muslims. Now, here's a recent post by Kurtz featuring a Palestinian woman from Gaza who's talking about the difficulty she's having in securing the emergence from family members from the Gaza Strip so that they can join her in Canada. And this is what Kurtz has to say about this woman's plight. She's upset Canada isn't doing more to bring in Gazans. We've been advocating with politicians, quote. No, says Kurtz, you occupy streets, manipulate, cause chaos, division, destruction, threaten Jews, Christians, and democracy. Now Gazans are suing to get their relatives here faster. Now, let's break this down a little bit, shall we? She says, you occupy streets, manipulate, cause chaos, division, destruction, threaten Jews, Christians, and democracy. Who is you? Obviously, she's not just talking about this woman, because a single individual can't occupy streets or cause chaos or threaten democracy. She's speaking about a group. And the group she's speaking about here is almost certainly Muslims. It could be Arabs, it could be Muslims. Probably she's speaking about both. And she's throwing all of them into the hopper. She's not saying that there are some bad apples in these communities that engage in this sort of behavior. She's saying all of you. That's effectively what she's saying. And she's saying that Muslims, and potentially she's referring here to Palestinians and other Arabs as well, that they threaten Canadian democracy and they threaten Christians. You know, that's really something when you look at the abuse that the Israeli genocidal entity has heaped upon Arab Christians, both inside occupied Palestine and elsewhere, like Lebanon and Syria, and the fact that the genocidal Israeli military is doing everything possible to prop up sadistic Arab tyrants who will do the bidding of Washington as though it's a promoter of democracy. But at the end of the day, whatever you may think about Israel's conduct over there, we should have no difficulty in accepting that this type of commentary, which is clearly aimed at denigrating Muslims as a whole, is hate speech. It is unequivocally hate speech. And I'm going to come back to the criminal implications of that in just a moment. I want to take a look at another one of her hateful posts relating to Muslims and Arabs. Here, she has featured an advertisement from Canada's intelligence agency, CSIS, seeking to attract people who want to work at the agency to protect the country. Now, as you can see there are three individuals featured. One of them appears to be a Muslim woman wearing a hijab. Another one is a black woman in the center, and then there's a white man on the right. And she says, what do you think of its ad to attract candidates to protect the country? What she's implying here quite clearly is that Muslims cannot be relied upon to protect the country, and that they are therefore unfit to seek employment with Canada's intelligence agency. Again, should be obvious to any fair-minded people who actually believes in human equality that this is a slur directed at Muslims. And she might also be directing this, by the way, at black people, because as I mentioned, there is a black woman featured in the center of this photo. Based on the totality of her commentary, I think we can safely assume that she isn't questioning whether white men are qualified to work for CSIS and protect the country. And I guess to sum it all up, I'll show you this doozy issued on the 13th of August of this year. According to Kurtz, Canada is the crown jewel of the Muslim Brotherhood. It is all according to plan. Well, what is she telling us here? She's telling us that the Muslim Brotherhood is seeking to take over Canada and that they're succeeding. Again, if this isn't designed, if you don't think that this is designed to generate hostility and suspicion towards Muslims, I have a bridge to sell you. You know, the supreme irony in all of this is that Kurtz plays the victim while openly admitting that her own comments are harsh. Here's a recent post on X in which she wrote, "I know my words may sound quite harsh at times, but please take comfort in knowing I mean every single word and I will not back down." So let's get this straight. It's perfectly fine for Kurtz to direct what she describes as quite harsh language at a people being subjected to a genocide by her beloved satanic entity. But those who respond to her vile sentiments with their own harsh language should be imprisoned and ordered to pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. With that, I'd like to share with you certain provisions of the Criminal Code of Canada. And what I put up on the screen here is Section 319, or excerpts of Section 319 of the Criminal Code. And you'll see paragraph 1, it states, "Everyone who by communicating statements in any public place incites hatred against any identifiable group, where such incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace, is guilty of A, an indictable offense, and is liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or B, an offense punishable on summary conviction." And then paragraph 2, and this is the one, we can debate whether, Kurtz's vile commentary, despite her wide following, and the inflammatory nature of it and how incessant it is, we could debate whether that commentary is likely to lead to a breach of the peace. I think you could certainly make a strong argument that it is likely to lead to a breach of the peace. But let's suppose that the cops decide that that's an element of this criminal offense which they would have difficulty establishing beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, let's look at 2, willful promotion of hatred. This is the second paragraph of Section 319. "Everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group is guilty of an indictable offense and is liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or an offense punishable or on summary conviction." So this section doesn't require the prosecution to prove that the hateful language is going to, or is likely to lead to, a breach of the peace. And I, for the life of me, can't imagine why the cops don't see this as being a very viable prosecution against Dahlia Kurtz. The real question here is, why haven't the police charged this sick, depraved influencer with the willful promotion of hate in violation of Section 319(2) of the Criminal Code? As far as I know, they aren't even investigating her for the willful promotion of hate. Now, before I leave the subject of hate speech, I feel obliged to point out that under Clause 2.1 of Section 319 of the Criminal Code, and you can see that clause here in the middle of the screen, it is provided that, quote, everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes anti-Semitism by condoning, denying, or downplaying the Holocaust is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. Now, it's clear that this section, because it refers to anti-Semitism, is referring to the Holocaust against the Jewish people, which ended some 80 years ago. It's not referring to other genocides that have happened either in the distant past or in recent history, but specifically it is tailored to the genocide that was perpetrated by the Europeans and specifically Germans against the Jewish people during the Second World War. The proposition that I think any fair-minded person of conscience should readily understand and embrace is this, and that is that it is worse to deny an ongoing Holocaust than to deny one that is over and that ended some 80 years ago. Now, why do I say that? I say that because it is now quite clear to anyone who's paying attention that the most effective means of bringing an end to the Holocaust that is happening now is to put enough pressure on our governments, especially Western governments who are the main backers and providers of the genocidal Israeli entity, to cause them to intervene and to bring the genocide to an end. This is going to depend very likely on mass public pressure. And when someone like Dahlia Kurtz is out there willfully using her broad audience and her influence to sow doubt in the minds of her contemporaries that there is a Holocaust happening now in Gaza, and not only is she sowing doubt, she's actually ridiculing and mocking the victims of the Israeli Holocaust against the Palestinian people. What she is doing, and doing quite intentionally, I should say, is diminishing the likelihood that those who watch her program and are influenced by her will put pressure on their government to stop the ongoing Holocaust. In other words, she is making it more likely, using her influence, that our government will not do what is necessary to put a stop to the ongoing Holocaust. And she therefore has the blood of the victims of Israel's genocide on her hands. So she is having an impact. It is entirely reasonable, given the breadth of her audience and the degree of her influence, as she herself describes it in her petition filed with the Quebec Superior Court, that she is diminishing the likelihood of Canadian government intervention to bring an end to this Holocaust. And that is why I say that it is worse to deny an ongoing Holocaust than it is to deny one that ended some 80 years ago. Now, we don't have a provision, at least not at this point in time, in the Criminal Code of Canada, which specifically addresses the denial or downplaying of the Holocaust against the Palestinian people. But as I pointed out earlier, we do have a provision criminalizing the willful promotion of hatred, and there is absolutely no justification for the police failing to investigate and prosecute Dahlia Kurtz under this provision for denying the ongoing Holocaust against the Palestinian people and mocking the victims of that Holocaust. Now, this brings me back to the subject of Neil Oberman. As I mentioned, this is the lunatic Zionist who is Kurtz's lawyer in this lawsuit. On August 10th, Israel struck a media tent in Gaza City, killing Al Jazeera journalist Anas al-Sharif and several other Al Jazeera colleagues. Al-Sharif had been awarded a Pulitzer Prize for his journalism in Gaza. Israel's murder of al-Sharif was so brazen that even the pro-Israel New York Times published an op-ed on August 21st which explicitly accused Israel of assassinating Mr. al-Sharif. So what did this so-called lawyer, Neil Oberman, have to say about Israel's murder of a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist in the devastated Gaza Strip? Here's what he had to say, folks. On August 11th, he put out a post in which he said the IDF and multiple independent sources have confirmed that al-Sharif was a Hamas terrorist. CTV is mourning his loss, journalism at its laziest, Mark Carney's Canada. At this point, you would have to be borderline insane, if not outright belonging, as Roger said, in the loony bin, to believe that the Israeli military is a credible source. Nothing that the Israeli military says that is self-serving should be taken or assumed to be true. Only if Israel says something self-serving that is backed up by compelling, objective, credible evidence should you begin to even contemplate the possibility that it might be true. Now, he goes on to say here, Oberman, this so-called lawyer, that multiple independent sources have confirmed that Anas al-Sharif was a Hamas terrorist. Who are these sources, Mr. Oberman? Why don't you mention any of these sources? If you're going to, as a lawyer, especially somebody who is supposed to be schooled in the rules of evidence and understand how you mount a case and support your position with credible evidence, why don't you cite any of these so-called multiple independent sources? I'll tell you why. Because there are no independent, credible sources who have come forward and said that Anas al-Sharif was a member of Hamas. And by the way, even if he was a member of Hamas, that in and of itself doesn't make him a legitimate target for assassination. He was not a combatant. There is absolutely no evidence. You certainly don't cite any here, Mr. Oberman, and I'm not aware of any that al-Sharif was engaged in combat in the Gaza Strip, or that he participated as a combatant in the attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023. And so all you're doing here, Mr. Oberman, is you are justifying Israel's latest murder of a journalist, and one who's a Pulitzer Prize winner at that. This is the depth to which Dahlia Kurtz's lawyer routinely stoops in his public commentary about Israel and Palestinians. Now, here's another particularly offensive comment by Neil Oberman on X. This is something he put out on July 21st. And in it, he writes, in a world in need of moral clarity, a bunch of foreign ministers, including our own, opt for moral mud. And they're referring here to a statement by the Canadian Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, that the suffering of civilians in Gaza is horrific. And she goes on and states, together with 25 other partners, Canada's message is clear. The war in Gaza must end now. We call for an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and a full resumption of humanitarian aid, including food. Now, before I go back to Oberman's detestable commentary, let's bear in mind here that despite her rhetoric, Anita Anand and her government have not imposed any meaningful sanctions on Israel. None. They've imposed every manner of sanction upon the Russian Federation, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the government of Venezuela, the elected government of Venezuela, and sanctions that are doing very extensive damage to the civilian population of these and other countries. But they have not imposed a single meaningful sanction on Israel. And they are not taking meaningful steps, the Canadian government, to alleviate their suffering. They've been putting out lots of photographs and videos of airdrops into Gaza, but humanitarian organizations, including Doctors Without Borders, have condemned these airdrops as being grotesquely inadequate and also dangerous to the starving Palestinians below. So that's the background here. And what does Oberman say about Anita Anand's July 21st post about the horrific suffering in Gaza. He says all, quote, suffering in Gaza, close quote, is the end result of a death cult that committed mass murder nearly 2 years ago and decades of terrorism prior and still holds hostages, the majority of whom are corpses. He has put the phrase suffering in Gaza in quotation marks, obviously in order to generate doubt about the extent of suffering in Gaza. And secondly, this lunatic has the audacity to say, in effect, that Israel bears zero responsibility for any of the suffering in Gaza, because he states explicitly, that's the obvious implication of his assertion, that all suffering in Gaza is ultimately the result of the Hamas attacks on October 7th, 2023. Of course, Oberman is obliterating the decades of suffering that the people of Gaza underwent at the hands of Israel prior to October 7th of 2023. For example, multiple Western human rights organizations and Israeli human rights organizations, including B'Tselem, Amnesty International, Yesh Din, Human Rights Watch, the UN Special Rapporteur for the Occupied Palestinian Territories, I could go on, opined long before October 7th, 2023, that Israel was committing apartheid in the occupied Palestinian territories. And of course, there was collective punishment, and there was land theft and water theft and torture, including the torture of children. That too was documented by Israeli human rights organizations prior to October 7th, 2023. You would think that a practicing lawyer with this level of experience, the experience that Oberman claims to have, would have something to say about that mountain of evidence. But because this man is so fanatically committed to Israel's genocidal project, he readily obliterates all of that from the discussion about the suffering of the people in Gaza, which he isn't even prepared to acknowledge. Now, this character, Oberman, who has, I think, a couple of thousand followers on X, 2,382 followers, he regularly puts out these pathetic little, 1.5, 2-minute videos in which he spews some lunacy about the posture of the Liberal Party towards Israel and Palestine. So here's a recent example. This was issued on July 30th. It's been watched by a whopping 259 people. 7 people have reposted it. 17 people have liked it. Here's what he had to say.
Hi, everybody. Neil Oberman. Important message. What's your government up to while you're working hard and paying taxes? Well, tomorrow they want to consider whether they should follow the leader and coerce Israel into giving up its right to protect itself. So if they don't do that, they're going to go recognize something that they don't know what they're recognizing. When they don't even recognize what they're doing here, they're going to recognize something else elsewhere. What's the message? Your government is just basically derelict, and its leaders, well, God, I don't know what to tell you about those folks. But hey, where's our member of parliament? Is he on vacation, hiding under a desk? Hey, by the way, your tweets are out there. They're going to come back to haunt you, my friend. But here's the message. We shouldn't take it anymore. All Canadians should just say enough is enough. We pay too much taxes. Why are we paying for people to come here and hate on us? I don't know. We shouldn't accept it. This government is malaligned, ill-adjusted, and simply impaired. And by the way, they have a Hamas wing, and it's strong, and it's shown in their cabinet. But hey, Canadians are smarter than that. They weren't so smart in the last election, but I think they're getting smarter now. What's my message to you? We just got to say no. We got to take back our country. Réveillez-vous, wake up. Oh, by the way, for those municipal folks here on the island of Montreal who also support the Liberal Party, your day is coming too in the municipal elections. It's not over for you. Trust me when I say people know what you're doing. They know what you're doing. Hey, Canada, sorry to break the news to you, but it's broken. It's got to be fixed. And all those haters who don't like my message, guess what? Don't give a shit. Have a nice day.
You heard that right, folks. The Liberal Party of Canada, the pro-Israel Liberal Party of Canada, has a Hamas wing, and it's even in the cabinet of Mark Carney. And you saw there or you may have been able to see, I don't know whether it was large enough, that in this lunatic diatribe, Oberman featured a post from Anthony Housefather and castigated him because Housefather dishonestly claims to be a supporter of the two-state solution. And of course, Oberman was quite explicitly trying to persuade people to oppose the immigration of Palestinians to Gaza, to Canada, I should say, even though we are complicit in the suffering of these victims of Israel's genocide, and they desperately need all of the compassion that the government of Canada can exhibit towards them. At the end of the day, I continue to be amazed that scoundrels like Neil Oberman are permitted to practice law in this country. In my opinion, any lawyer who endorses Israel's satanic behavior should be deemed unfit to practice law and should be expelled unceremoniously from the legal profession. And since I'm on the subject of shameless Zionist lawyers who, in my opinion, are not fit to practice law, allow me to update you on a debate challenge that I issued. I issued a challenge to 18 or 19 prominent Zionist lawyers to debate me on the question of whether Israel is committing genocide. I did that a few months ago. I communicated my challenge to them directly by way of email to ensure that they were aware of it. Not a single one of them has accepted the challenge. And in fact, most of them didn't even have the courtesy of replying to me. And I would like to hereby extend my debate challenge to Neil Oberman. Or should I say Neil Doberman, because the man has stooped to becoming the legal profession's attack dog in Canada for the genocidal Israeli entity. Again, and to be clear, the challenge is this, Mr. Doberman, that you and I debate at a place and time that is mutually satisfactory to us and with a moderator that is mutually satisfactory, the question of whether Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. Folks, I'll let you know if Doberman summons the courage to accept my challenge. Based on prior experience, however, I very much doubt that he will. In the interim, we'll continue to follow this latest example of genocidal lawfare, and we'll advise you of any major developments in this litigation in the days and weeks ahead. For now, this is Dimitri Lascaris signing off from Kalamata, Greece on August 24th, 2025.